Hi, and welcome back to King Poe Myers. We're Ariadna,
And Dylan.
and we're back with another podcast, of course, episode. And today we start our wonderful and amazing King Month, and we're super, super excited. We have 4 different people every single Friday talking about King, and then even more King, basically. Who do we have today?
Today we have Dave Musson. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, guys. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Definitely. We loved your content. We still do love your content, better said in present tense. And you're such a King fan. And we're like, we have to get him on because, oh my God, yes.
Yep,
So
guilty.
before we start, tell us a little bit about yourself.
If you haven't guessed from the accent, I'm from the opposite side of the Atlantic Ocean to you guys. So I live in smack bang in the middle of England. My name's Dave. I read a lot of Stephen King. I run Stephen King quizzes on a Sunday on my Instagram.
Nice.
I've recently started a YouTube channel where I'm going through all of Stephen King's books and giving people 19 reasons to read it. And then aside from that, I'm in a band that is called Chapter 19, named after Stephen King. And our first single was called Stephen and was about Stephen King.
Excellent.
What else do I do aside from that? I host a few podcasts. I have a podcast about Slipknot. I host a couple of other podcasts as well. I've got a baby boy. I've got an annoying dog. I've got a beautiful wife. That's me pretty much.
That's for you pretty much. I love it. We're definitely gonna leave the links down below of where everybody can find you if they like Slipknot, for example, they go directly to that. Or even just more King. I really want to hear more of your band, without a doubt. I think that's so cool. So my other question, actually, before we start with all the top 5 and things like that, why do you love Stephen King?
I think for me, he's just a terrific storyteller, and in my working life, I sort of started off. I trained as a journalist, and I've done quite a few jobs that involve writing and creating stories and telling stories. And you always want to take inspiration from people who are really good in your field. And every great writer I know personally has on writing on their bookshelf, whether they like Stephen King or not. And I think that is real. That gives real sort of kudos to just his skills as a storyteller. Like sometimes he doesn't land the ending, and sometimes his plots are a bit wacky, but he keeps you hooked all the way through. And he's such a varied writer as well. People write him off as being this horror guy, but just pick up different seasons, and the 4 stories in there really show his range. You've got drama, you've got heart-wrenching stuff, you've got nostalgia, and you've got the scary stuff as well. So I just think he's underappreciated. I think he's to be as prolific as he is and still have the consistency and the quality that he has. He's just a master of what he does, and yeah, I will back him all the way.
We absolutely love hearing all that. I definitely agree. Not that King is definitely Dylan's favorite.
Yes, absolutely. And I completely agree with what you said. He's not just a horror guy. Whenever I hear that, I'm like, he did, Shawshank Redemption. No, he didn't. He did.
There's that famous story, isn't there, where he was in a bookstore and a woman saw him and sort of started saying, "Oh yeah, you just write all that scary stuff." And I think she was either holding The Green Mile or Shawshank, and he was like, "Well, I wrote that." And she's like, "No, you didn't." I was like, "Fine, whatever." Like, he literally did, but people just they just associate him with the stuff that got him famous. But that's what people always say when they discover I read a lot of King, and they go, "Oh, he's too scary for me." It's like, yeah, well, I mean, he wrote these ones as well, and they're always shocked at it. So yeah, on a mission to educate everyone that he's not just a scary stories person.
Oh, his scary stuff is amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, we get asked that a lot, especially Dylan, of course. Like, what's the first King book to read or something like that? And
yeah, and that's always really tough because there's so many different ways to go.
I got asked that very question on Instagram the other week, actually, and it was like, well, and the guy asking was like, I think I want to be scared, but I don't want to be too scared. But also, I'm intrigued to see. Yeah, I'm also intrigued to see his non-scary stuff. So I ended up going back to about 5 of them. And it's like, well, okay, well, you could do 11/22, or you could do different seasons, or you could do Night Shift, or you could do Salem's Lot. They're all great starting points. And then obviously I threw in the one that will probably get mentioned a bit in our interview, so I won't reference it now. But with it being my favorite, I always throw that in as well.
Definitely. So what are we talking? The first book.
So we are talking today about the Dead Zone. But before we get into the Dead Zone, let's talk about some of your other favorites. So you gave us your list, and in 5th place, you said Misery.
Yeah, Misery. So it's always tricky putting together a top 10 of King.
It is.
I think aside from the Dead Zone being my favorite, and it has been since I first read it, so there's probably like 20 books that are vying for those 9 places, and a lot of it depends on how I feel at the time. But
Exactly.
I'm in the process of doing my own chronological reread of his entire bibliography, and as we sit down and record this, I'm just rounding out the 90s, so I'm just about to start Hearts in Atlantis. But Misery was one that really got me the first time, and going back, it's it doesn't lose anything at all. And I think it takes on even extra weight now, like when you look at the culture of sort of toxic fandom that is out there that celebrities have to put up with nowadays, and you read Misery and like, yeah, he's using a typewriter and there's a few references that are out of date, but the entitlement of Annie Wilkes as as being the number 1 fan and what she thinks she could that entitles her to, it's so relatable to what so many people have to put up with on social media today, so many famous people. So yeah, it's a great story, it's gripping, it's terrifying, but it feels like it translates well today as well. So yeah, it's a really, it maintained its high place in there for me on the reread.
Would you say that you enjoyed the movie adaptation?
Yeah. I think for me, I think it's one of the best King adaptations. I think Rob Reiner, just like him and Frank Darabont, really get what to do with that sort of source material, and you go with them if they have to make changes. Generally, they do it for the betterment of the picture, and I think that there are obviously going to be differences between the book and the film, but yeah, I think Annie, Kathy Bates's performance is just like terrifying and brilliant and just all kinds of amazing. And it's the only King film that has resulted in an Oscar at the time of recording. So, and that was for Kathy Bates. So,
and she deserved it.
Yeah, absolutely she did. But yeah, I think it's one of those ones, it's one of those films that people have probably seen far more of it than they actually think, even if they haven't sat down to watch the entire movie, because there's so many scenes from that movie that have just become memes and have just become sort of hooks of pop culture that, it's like when I watched The Shining for the first time, I realized I'd seen probably like half of the film just through pop culture references. So yeah, I think Misery is a terrific adaptation, and it's one of those ones where you look at it and go, don't ever remake that. There is no need to remake that.
Yeah, you can't touch that.
No.
I mean, have you watched I think it's Hulu, the Castle Rock TV series?
So I watched season 1. I've not done season 2 yet.
Okay.
And I know season 1 it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of how people feel about it. I think it was really good. I think the ending was a little bit disappointing, but I think across those 10 episodes, I was gripped for most of it. I've seen so many bad things said about season 2 that I'm really nervous about going in, but I'm really curious to see what they do with it as well. And they earned my trust on season 1, so I'm definitely going to get around to watching it. It's just finding the time at the moment.
Did you watch it?
I got through half of it, and I didn't stop it for any reason. I was just busy with life. But I do think it's worth your time to at least check it out.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I've had a hunch that you watched quite a bit. I know how much you love Misery as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I argue that Annie Wilkes, you can say that that's King's greatest creation.
I think there's a really strong case for that. She's, of all the monsters he's created, it's usually his human ones that are the most terrifying. And she is, for me, it's probably up there with her and the bad guy, my favorite as well. You know, those two humans that King created are both terrifying, and they're both relatable to today as well. You know, you've got
That
the
was
crazy fan and the
actually,
crazy politician.
yeah, oh gosh. That was actually my next question for you both. Like, where do you rank Andy Wilkes,
Annie Wilkes.
sorry, in Stephen King's all-time favorite characters?
I mean, I don't know if Dylan, do you want to go first?
Oh yeah, me. I mean, like you just said, as a human character, not like Pennywise or anything, but as a human character, he's created so many great ones, but I don't think I can put anyone above her. She believes that she's right.
Yep.
And you can't steer her away from what she believes. I saw the movie when I was very, very young, and I was really happy when I finally read the book, and we got so much more information on her.
Yeah.
About like her husband, and
yep.
I forget the exact name, but like she had like her special place, like the Screaming Shack or something, where she would just go and, you know, we don't know, we never find out what she did there. I don't think anyone can really top Annie Wilkes as a human character in the King universe, but that's just
I'd agree. I think she has a real strong case for being that most terrifying human that King has created, and the way she flicks from being this caring, sweet bedside nurse to just this absolute maniac who is the most terrifying thing you've ever seen. And I mean, for me, it's that bit where Paul discovers her scrapbook, and you go through it and you follow it over time, and you're just like, wow, you need to get out of that house, because she is terrifying. So yeah, I think she's definitely up there. I mean, obviously, given what my favorite book is, I think Greg Stilson is terrifying as well. And then if we're talking humans, like Henry Bowers, I mean, of all the greasers that King has created, he is by far the most twisted.
Not to throw you under the bus, dear, but Ari isn't really the biggest fan of horror, so we started, like, one of the first horror movies ever was It. We decided to watch It. She's like, I want to try It. And we actually stopped watching it because it wasn't Pennywise that it was getting to her. It was Henry Bowers. And I'm like, I get it, because King can really create an incredible scumbag. And Henry Bowers is just, he's irredeemable.
Yep.
Like, they do talk about his father's very abusive, and like he is created through like that abuse, but what he does to those kids, and Henry Bowers.
Yeah, and on screen with an 80s mullet as well, he's even more terrifying, isn't he?
I do want to finish the movie though. I want to see the whole movie by now. Because we talked a lot more. I've seen a lot of more horror stuff now, so I'm slowly getting into it. This is the reason why we started the podcast as well, kind of like having both worlds perspective.
Yeah.
Of like someone who really loves horror, obviously Dylan, who someone who I was like, horror? No, I'm fine, thank you. But then I realized that like it's really deep, and I love deep stuff, so I was like, oh, even Scream. Like, I don't know. We're not gonna get into Scream now, obviously, but still. So I do want to see it.
Yeah.
What's next? The other question that we had in mind over here. Actually, no, we're going to talk about the fourth.
All right.
His fourth pick.
Your fourth pick. If I can find it on my phone. Different seasons.
Yeah. So I when I referenced it previously, like it's a great starting point for King, and a great way of understanding what a huge range he has as a writer. And it's just, even when you just look at it objectively and you think, okay, this one collection of novellas has the stories that inspired Shawshank and Stand By Me in there, sandwiched around Apt Pupil, which is one of the most dark and twisted things he's written.
Yeah.
And then this wonderful creepy story at the end, The Breathing Method, which as it stands is the only one that hasn't been adapted into anything. But
I think they're working on it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I remember seeing something along that, and I'd love to see that, and I'd love, even build out an anthology series around the club. That'd be really cool as well.
That is one of my ultimate dreams for Stephen King. To him to make a full story about that club, because he has the breathing method and he has a short story, I think, in Skeleton Crew.
Yeah, the man who would not shake hands.
And that club.
Yeah.
I want to know so much more. I want to learn about this club so badly.
Yeah.
My question I think it's both of our questions actually, is why did you include this particular book in your top 5 or 10 or whatever? Because this one has 4 novellas. So that's what what Dylan was telling me. It's like, how do you include that? In the sense of just in general, you in particular, but it's different, isn't it?
Because for me, I have a hard time putting different seasons 4 Past Midnight in my top. Not because I adore them, but
you really do.
It's really hard for me to pick 4 novellas against one standalone story. Like for me, it just, my mind doesn't let it happen. So I have like all of his like novellas ranked, but I can't have them in my top because it just, my mind won't let me, because I'm just crazy.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're crazy. I think that's very reasonable. I mean, for me, I think none of his other collections of novellas would come close to troubling my top 10, because generally his other ones, they're a bit less consistent. 4 Past Midnight, on my reread, I remember enjoying that a lot first time round, but on my reread, it was like, okay, The Langoliers is like 200 pages too long. I've got a bit of a soft spot for Secret Garden, Secret Window, but not many other people like it. The Library Policeman is great, but really dark. And Sundog is kind of cool, but is also a bit of just an extended prologue to Needful Things, really. So there's no level of consistency there. But Different Seasons, I think, it's just one of those ones where I look at it and every novella, it's at least, everything in there is at least a 9 out of 10. And those 4, I think, because I've only ever read them as Different Seasons, they just feel right as a book to me. So they just feel like 4 parts of a book. So, and it always feels like they're meant to be. I know they've released separate editions of pretty much each one now.
Yeah.
But it just feels right to take those as a collection. And I think also from the point of view that they are such a good starting point as well. If you are looking to recommend something for people to get started on, you can do far worse than jumping in with those 4. So yeah, I think, but overall, I think it's just that consistency. They're all so good, and yeah, I'm just into it.
What is your ranking of the 4 novellas then?
Oh, are we both doing this, or do you just want mine?
We can both do it. We can both do it.
Okay. So let me think. I'll try and do mine on the fly. I would say it sort of pains me to say it, because it's always the overlooked one, but I think The Breathing Method realistically is probably the fourth best one, not the worst one, the 4th best one. And then for me, I'd probably, it's really tough. I'd probably have The Body as the top one, as my favorite, but with an asterisk by it that some of the examples of Gordy's work are probably more than we need, and actually the way it was done in the movie sort of consolidated that a little bit better. But I still really love it as a book. And then between Shawshank and Apt Pupil, it depends if I'm feeling in a particularly twisted mood or not, because if I'm feeling like I want some positivity and I want something to lift me up, then it's going to be Shawshank taking that 2nd spot. But actually, if I want to read something nasty, I mean, Apt Pupil is one of his nastiest things he's ever written, I think. So I would probably almost put them joint 2nd, and it really depends what the mood of the day is. Like, I'm sat here at home, we've had a really grey, rainy day all day today, so Apt Pupil is probably sitting 2nd. But if the sun comes out tomorrow, I might be leaning more towards Shawshank.
That's interesting. He reminds me a lot of what you would say because it depends on your mood.
Yeah,
What are
yeah.
you?
My mood dictates really like my
Mm.
favorites and everything. Um, I love talking to King fans like you because I'm so opposite, but I love how everyone has their own personal take. For me, I would have to start with the breathing method
Oh
because
wow.
I was so madly in love with that club
Mm.
on Christmas Eve, them telling these ghost stories. The butler that has been there for how long?
Yeah, yeah.
There's just I'm a reader who I don't need everything explained to me. I
Mm.
love having a ton of mysteries and question marks after reading something, and that just excited me.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it, especially since I had a coworker who was saying, don't even read that story. I'm like, no, I want to read all the different seasons. And I'm very happy I did because I absolutely adore it. I can't wait to read it this Christmas season because it gets me
Yeah.
in the holiday mood. Number two, I would have to say Apt Pupil because it's Apt Pupil.
Mhm.
That's just dark and wonderful. My third place, I would have to do Shawshank.
Mhm.
I respect what Shawshank is, and I understand that it's, I think, considered one of the greatest movies of all time.
Yep.
Rightfully so. For me, it's just I don't really like stories in prisons.
Yeah.
I've never been to prison. I've never had a loved one in prison, but prisons, I understand the concept of, having, evil and like
Yeah.
horrible people in this place. And that's great storytelling. For me, prisons just don't work. I like Shawshank. I like the movie, but I'll reread it, but I don't see me rereading it for a while.
It's a bit dwarfed by the movie as well, isn't it? Like the movie has got such a reputation. It's
Mm,
it's one of the few ones where it the movie probably does edge the written version, and therefore particularly if you come to it reading it for the first time, having seen the movie, or just knowing that it's the greatest movie of all time or whatever, it is really struck. You're never gonna quite live up to that reputation that it's got.
mm-hmm, agreed. And then the last, The Body. I have not seen Stand By Me, and everyone is shocked that I've not seen this movie. It's on my list. I do want to see it. I found The Body was a really nice coming of age story,
Yeah.
but I wasn't really moved by it. I think
Mm.
my favorite part was the fact that I believe Ace Merrill's in it.
Yeah.
So I got a character from Needful Things. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
it's Ace being like the Henry Bowers of
Yeah.
Castle Rock.
Yeah.
But once again, a really good story, but
Did you watch the movie Stand By Me?
Yeah, I've seen it quite a few times. Um, yeah, to be honest, I think Stand By Me is one that has perhaps jumped up my list on my reread as I've got older. Like I read most of King's bibliography first in my sort of early to mid 20s, and going back to them. So I've been doing the reread now for the last year and a half, so mid 30s, and you just have a different perspective on things, and
mm,
perhaps I'm a little bit more nostalgic, and that's even though it's not a nostalgia that I share with those characters and Stand By Me, because obviously I wasn't around in the 50s, but yeah, just that idea of a looking back on an adventure with your friends, it's quite
mm,
cool, and I think because it's so different as well, like particularly when
Mm.
you look at it in his own chronological timeline, like comes between, what was it, Cujo and Christine, I think is where different seasons sits into the list,
so
like, and to
So
throw it,
random. Yeah.
it's like a band. I don't know. It would have been like Metallica dropping an acoustic EP in between Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets or something. And you've got to praise him for his boldness as well, as much as anything.
Oh, I love that. Because I have seen the movie. But it's like I watched it when I was a kid. I didn't, and
mm,
that's one of those things like you guys said at the beginning of our conversation, like, oh, I didn't know that was King at
Mm.
all. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Next one.
third place, Pet Cemetery.
Oh yeah, Pet Cemetery. I mean, this is the one where I should probably how are you on swearing on your podcast?
Oh,
Because I
feel
won't.
free to.
Go for it.
Because well, I only asked because in my one of my videos I did on my channel, like, you know, I was sort of I built a Stephen King starter kit and offered lots of entry points into his bibliography, and like, you know, if you want to get scared, read this. But then the one that sat with Pet Sematary was like, okay, I want to be fucked up. I want to completely have my head fucked up, and that is Pet Sematary. And I think it's one of those ones that, you know, however old you are and whatever life experience you've got, you're going to be disturbed by this book. You know, it disturbed King so much to the point where he was very reluctant to release it. Sorry. But, you know, I read this first time mid-20s, and it's like, wow, this is dark. This is really scary. There's stuff coming back from the dead. It all just goes off in the final quarter, and it's terrifying. Reading this again, when did I reread this? Must have been towards the end of last year. So reading this as a new dad, and, you know, just in a totally different place, and just looking at it, it's obviously scary from all the stuff of what happens to the kids, but also just having that sort of decade of life behind me, and as is the way with 10 years of life, you experience things, you gain things, but you lose things, and you lose people as well. And that book as a portrait of grief, like, you strip away the zombies, and it is such a heart-wrenching look at what grief can do to people. But in many ways, it's a really beautiful book about grief as well. Like, again, it's a weird thing to say about that book, but there is a lot of beauty in what he writes in that book. But it's so dark, and it's one of those books that has given, one of the few King books that has really got under my skin and given me a real book hangover. And you just find yourself thinking about it again and again, and you just what it drove Lewis to do. And then there's also the other bit of like, well, what happened to Ellie? You know, like, what's she doing now? You know, her whole family's gone. Like, I wonder what she's doing now. Maybe she's floating around Maine, like, doing something crazy. But yeah, I mean, what an incredible book. Just so dark and so bleak, and, like I say, yet so to have so many passages that are really wonderful pieces of writing. It's a really weird mix, but it as a whole, it is just like chef's kiss emoji right there.
And I don't know if you agree, but that we won't say it for people who want to read it, but that final page, just my jaw dropped, and I just kind of stood there like
I can vouch for that.
Oh my
I can
God.
vouch for that.
I absolutely love that ending. And
it shook you, like, and you don't get scared easily, but that one, much like what Dave was saying, it shook you. And I'm like, oh my God, if it does that to you, holy moly.
Yeah, that's one of the few Kings that I was very disturbed reading. And I'm not a person I'm not a squeamish person. I can take a lot of the stuff on the chin. Like, books do not, like, I love horror, but I'm never afraid. Pet Sematary really, really made me uncomfortable in a good way. When his wife talked about her sister, those, ugh.
And for all that I mean, you know, like ignoring the 2019 movie, which I think had some good points, but was generally not the best idea. Like, the original movie, for all that it's quite campy and quite of its time, the Zelda stuff really does a good job of taking it from page to screen, I think, as well as it could do in that visual format. And yeah, I think there's just, you're right. I mean, that stuff with Zelda is really scary, and I think that's the key thing with Pet Sematary. Like, it's not so much the gore and the violence. It's disturbing, and it is creeping, and it has a presence right from page 1 to page 420 or however long it is. There is a presence there that is just wholly unnerving. And as we sit down and record this, there's a read along happening on Instagram amongst a few people, and there's a few people I follow who are reading it for the first time, and they're commenting like, "Oh, I'm 50 pages in, and I already feel like something big is going to happen." And it just as an atmosphere read, it is just unbeatable.
What did you take away from the book?
Just the real depths that grief can push educated, normal, successful, happy people to. And I guess it also really captures like that human inability to keep a secret, particularly a dark secret. Because you could make a case for saying it's all Judd's fault, really.
Yeah.
Because he lets the I was going to say the cat out of the bag, but he lets the cat out of the grave, But
good one. I like that.
Yeah, I'm quite pleased with that as well. That came up on the top. I didn't even pre-plan that. I think I just, like I say, first time I read it, I took a chilled spine out of it. Reading it as a parent, it's a whole new level of just like, wow, I need to just put that book down and sit calmly for an hour or so.
Because he's read it twice. Would you read it again?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then when we become parents, we'll find out. You're gonna feel like him, I feel like.
Yeah, I'm gonna be holding my kid nonstop after reading that.
Yeah. So that movie came out 89. So when that movie came out, I would have been about 3.5, so not that much older than Gage in the movie. And my mum's friend was like, "Don't watch that. Do not watch that. It will mess you up too much. Just leave it a few years."
Yeah. Alrighty then. So up for the next one. Thank you for talking about Pet Sematary so much. I loved hearing about it. It.
Second place.
Yeah.
Classic.
It. Yeah. I mean, I think I've said it somewhere. I can't remember. I think it might have been on one of my videos. I think like actually, if I take myself out of it for a moment and look at things objectively, I feel like it is probably Stephen King's best piece of work from my looking at it as objectively as I can do. For him to be able to tell a story across different timelines with a big cast of characters, and to end up with a book that is 1,500 pages, and it doesn't feel like it never feels like it's a 1,500 pager. You just fly through it, and it's him at the peak of his powers in terms of world building, in terms of bullies, in terms of scary monsters, in terms of friendships, in terms of the heart lifting stuff as well. Like I was rereading this last summer. I sort of bumped it up my list so that it was fresh in my mind when chapter 2 came out. I just remember just catching myself a few times reading this, just like just sort of stopping and rereading just 2 sentences or a paragraph and just thinking like there's barely a wasted word here. And he's just, you look at it in the timeline of his career and where he wrote it, he's got that comfort of his reputation and he's set for life financially, and it would be very easy for him to sort of take his foot off the gas there and cruise and just put some monsters out. But actually, he's like taking that all in and just being like, okay, this is what I can do. And, he was going into that sort of saying, this is going to be my last horror book when he originally wrote it. This was going to be me going out on a bang in terms of the really scary stuff.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Well, I probably did, but I forgot that.
Well,
that was his thing, yeah.
Yeah, and how many years are we on from there? Like 34. But it's just you can find something on every page that is like, that is brilliant, that is great, and then the next page is like, whoa, what has he done there? I mean, there are a couple of scenes which are probably the ones that get talked about a lot, which are perhaps questionable, but actually even those ones I've seen very well argued cases for them. yeah, we're talking about the sewer orgy here,
Yeah,
but
of
yeah,
course.
I've even seen. I can't remember the gist of them off the top of my head, but I have seen pretty well reasoned cases for them. But yeah, it's just people get distracted by the fact that it's the killer clown, but it's an awesome book about friendship and about what hope can do for you and what togetherness can do for you.
Hmm.
I love the
And
way
it
you describe these books, I swear.
and it's also like Derry in that book, Derry as a
Mm,
character,
you
like
feel like you're there.
yeah, and it's just, I mean, one of the most disturbing scenes in that book for me is when you get the story of the gang of sort of mafia type gangsters who roll into Derry and end up getting murdered by the whole town because they all just find out that they're coming in, and then the town just like carries on as if that didn't happen, and nobody turns an eyelid to it. Nobody sort of bats an eyelid at all, and it's just, yeah, that town is one dark place.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Derry is right up there, of course, with Castle Rock, with Salem's Lot. Like, and especially for me, I come from a very small town where everyone
Mhm.
knows each other. I'm in New England. So, not obviously to the extent of Derry and Castle Rock, but I know that feeling of like,
Mhm.
everyone knows each other. And when something happens in town, everyone knows.
Yeah.
And like just that intense town pride and community.
Yeah. And just the way he weaves it with the losers, like, 6 of the 7 leave Derry after their childhood and become incredibly successful, but they have to come back and pay that debt. And
Hmm.
whereas they leave Mike there as the night watchman almost, and he's just a librarian, and he's got these 6 incredibly famous successful friends. And I just love that as a concept as well, of like, it's the whole you can check out but you'll never leave sort of thing. Like, they get away once, but they've got to come back and finish it off sort of thing.
Did you enjoy the movies?
Yeah, I did. I think I mean, the 1990 miniseries is wonderful. Tim Curry is just
Mhm.
amazing as Pennywise, and I think, for a TV series at the start of the 90s, that has some really scary stuff in there. I mean, like the shower scene in that
Hmm.
adaptation is truly terrifying. Um, and then as for the movies, I mean, yeah, I'm not quite to the same extent of, like, the general opinion is that chapter 1 is amazing and chapter 2 is a massive letdown. I think chapter 2 was, I loved the ambition that they showed in it, and it was always going to feel like a letdown because you had 2 years of people being blown away by how good chapter 1 was. And
That makes sense, actually.
yeah, and the adults, there was quite there were a couple of the adult cast who were very famous, and I, I heard a lot of cases being made for, like, they should really go for unknown actors and let them live that role, not be like, oh, that's James McAvoy doing an American accent, that's weird. And obviously you didn't get as much of the kids in chapter 2, and then the kids, I mean, chapter 1 was such a perfect storm in terms of, Stranger Things had become this huge
Yeah.
moment. The Stephen King Renaissance had well and truly happened. You got Finn Wolfhard in there as well, which sort of ties it all to Stranger Things. And because they were very sensible in shifting the timeline so that the kid's story was in the 80s, it tapped into that nostalgia piece for pretty much a significant chunk of the people who were going into the theaters to watch it. So you can see why it worked so well. And it's not surprising at all how much money it made. But yeah, I think chapter 2, I was very excited to go to chapter 2. I went to there was a back-to-back screening of chapter 1 and chapter 2 on the night
Nice.
chapter 2 came out, which was an absolute marathon to do. That's like pushing 6 hours of film. Um, and I came away from it pretty happy with chapter 2. I think I rewatched it a couple of times, and it's definitely the weaker of the two, but I still think there's plenty of good stuff. Where it loses me is, like, there's a sort of middle third where they just the losers are going around Derry and reliving being there, and it's so dependent on really predictable jump scares that it's just like, you're killing me here, guys. It's just, this isn't necessary. But like what I really love about chapter 2 is that they open it with the Adrian Mellon story, because like to go in on that story, like when I saw that in the trailer, I was like, okay, they're taking it seriously. They really are going to have a good stab at it. And I thought that was really, really dark as an opening. And even if the rest of it sort of fell away a bit, as a way of hooking you back in and being like, okay, yeah, I'm interested. I think that opening scene was terrific.
I thought the opening scene was terrific as well. And then I just think it fell off a cliff. Like, I was really upset with part 2. I think part 2, I don't know how it was in the UK, but here it was everywhere. Posters, merchandise, like they shelled out a lot of money. Everyone, like Pennywise was everywhere. So they want to make that a big summer blockbuster. And what really upset me about it was there were unnecessary comedy scenes. I feel like the magic of the book, as well as the original miniseries, is going back and forth between them as kids and adults. I think that's a very important part of the story. And when the first movie was just kids, I'm like, I understand what you're trying to do, but I feel like the flashbacks were very, very integral to the story. And with part 2, I just think for me, I think they were throwing everything up against the wall, trying to get something to stick. I thought the actor who did Pennywise was unbelievable. Yeah. He stole the show. It just disappointed me.
Yeah, in many ways, chapter 2 was almost a victim of the success of chapter 1, because, you know, chapter 1, they really could never have predicted quite how much money that movie would make. So, you know, there's quite a famous story of how the writers were sort of changed in that process. So, you know, there's an alternative script out there from Gary Fukunaga. I don't know how to pronounce the surname, but the other writer with the sort of Japanese sounding surname that I can't pronounce, but that was the original script, and I've heard interviews with people who've read that and said there was a lot of good stuff in there. But then you get chapter 2 and it's the follow-up to the highest grossing horror movie of all time, so they're obviously going to throw more budget at it, and they're going to throw all this money at the computerized jump scare scenes, and like the digital de-aging of the kids was slightly off-putting as well. It was, it was, I'd forgotten it was happening, and then one of the kids scenes came. I was like, why do their faces look like they've sort of melted a bit? That's really weird. But yeah, it was never gonna hit the heights of chapter 1. And you know, to throw in another musical reference, it's almost got that Chinese Democracy thing from Guns N' Roses. Like, you wait so long, or in this case, you hype it so much that whatever you put out was never going to satisfy people. I mean, that movie could have been far better than it was, and people would still write it off as just being nowhere near as good as chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's kind of what you told me as well for Halloween 3.
Yeah.
Because Michael wasn't in it, and that's why, so that's what it feels like from what you guys are talking about.
And for me, I don't care what anyone says, how campy they say the 90s version is. I think that version is outstanding. I think they have an all-star cast. They have Tim Curry as Pennywise. It was made, I think, in 1990, 1991. It's a bit campy. It was the time. I still think they were so loyal to the book, and the book has so much meat on it. Yeah, they didn't get everything, but I feel like from beginning to end, I'm like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I mean, that opening scene with Pennywise hiding in the behind the hiding behind the hung laundry where the little girl's in the garden, and sees him and he's smiling, and then next up her face is like, oh dear, I'm about to die.
Oh
Just
dear.
just
Oh my
really
goodness.
great.
I know we have to like start talking about your favorite one of all time, of course. But my last question with it is Pennywise the greatest Stephen King villain of all time?
Ooh,
Mm.
she definitely, it is definitely up there when we're talking monsters, because it can take on the form of whatever scares you the most, and that's really unstable, destabilizing for you. um
You have to look at my books right now because that's really tough.
I'm just trying to think if there are any other monsters that really jump out. I mean, I love Leland Gaunt in Needful Things, but
You stole the word. I love Leland Gaunt.
but
I
but he's
adore
a
him.
whole different type of scary, isn't he? Because he's just like a sort of, what's scary about him is that he knows all of the right things to say to all the right people to cause absolute carnage, whereas Pennywise will come and rip your arm off and then eat you, which is a whole different type of being scared.
It is, yeah. Oh
So
goodness.
yeah, I think Pennywise is definitely up there for the monsters that he's created, um, just because of that, just because he knows, just because
He knows how to
Pennywise
get
knows
you.
knows what to do, knows how to
Knows where
really
it
make
hurts
you
the most.
And
exactly.
also the fact that with Pennywise, he can kill anyone at any time. But it's like, well,
Yep.
why doesn't he just kill people? Well, he wants them to be afraid. Well,
Mhm.
why does he want them to be afraid? Well, it tastes better.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, that's horrible. Like,
Yep.
Alrighty then. All right, so definitely now in first place. We said it a few times already, but first place is
Dead Zone.
exactly. So why is that so your favorite?
So the first time I read it, it was probably the third or fourth King book I ever read, and it stood out as being different right there. So I think the first book I read was Cujo, and then I think I did Carrie and possibly Salem's Lot, and then The Dead Zone. And I loved that it was, there were scary parts, but it was, there was a bit more of a thriller feel to it. I really bought into Johnny Smith as a character, like that idea of like, he's literally called John Smith. Like he couldn't be more normal, everyday Western white man, and he, what's brilliant about him is, one one decision around basically not wanting to sleep with his girlfriend because it would probably cause a bit of gossip. He gets in that taxi, he's in the crash, and then his life just changes completely from that moment. Like that's his sliding doors moment right there. And the rest of the book is about him trying to use his powers for good, but whenever he does it, his power just kills a bit more of him. Like that's the sort of gut wrenching thing about it almost, is that even when he's putting that power to good use, it's still slowly killing him. And you know it's just, he doesn't want any of that, and you can really feel for it. Like he's just this normal guy who's been thrust into this extraordinary situation. So that's a big part of it. But then you get this sort of weird, this sort of sprawling plot that's like, okay, this guy can see what's going to happen to you when he touches you, but there's also like a serial killer thing that he helps solve, and then there's this great relationship he builds with the pupil he's tutoring and ends up sort of saving his life, and then the whole stuff with Greg Stilson and seeing potential for the end of the world and it basically driving him mad, and being hinged on that question of would you kill Hitler if you could go back in time, and using that as an equivalent. So on my first read, all of those things were like, wow, this is just such a stunning piece of work. And it kind of gets overlooked in the 70s King stuff, like when most people talk about it, because and I guess you can understand it, like it comes after Carrie, which is an icon of modern horror, then Salem's Lot, which is like a wonderful take on the vampire epic, then there's The Shining, which is like arguably the most popular, the most well-known horror book ever, and obviously has the movie adaptation. Then there's The Stand, which a lot of people have as their favorite, and then you get The Dead Zone, which is quite different at that point, but as we said, I like his different stuff. And then rereading it in the time of Trump, obviously Stilson stands out massively, massively. And you just think, wow, this is scary. And, King himself tweeted that, like, no, Stilson isn't like Trump. Trump's way scarier. And that's part of it.
Damn.
So yeah, to be honest, the first I've been hooked on the Dead Zone from that very first read where we're introduced to Greg Stilson and he kicks a dog to death for no reason. And it was just at this point that I was like, shit, every time Stephen King includes a dog, that dog dies. But I remember reading that passage. I was on my lunch break and I put the book down, put it back in my bag and just went outside because it was just like, I didn't see that level of brutality coming. And it was like, whoa, I need to know what happens with this. And then obviously it sort of pans out in a far less brutal way. But I don't know. It's just the one that I've thought about the most since reading it. It's the one that has captivated me the most. Rereading it was an absolute breeze. I went through it in about 2 days and it really does fly through. But I love how episodic as well it is. It is a great one for like, okay, I'm going to read 50 pages of this tonight and sort of do that episode of it. And then tomorrow I'll pick up and it's another 50 pages, but it's the next chapter. It's the next sort of progression of the story. And it's just, yeah, I just love it, as you can probably tell.
We can.
How did you feel about the movie adaptation?
I'm a big fan. I mean, I love Christopher Walken because of Wayne's World 2. So Wayne's World and Wayne's World 2 are probably my favorite 2 movies. And
Nice.
Christopher Walken has terrified me since seeing Wayne's World 2. I would say that he is, if I'm being generous, a surprising choice for Johnny and arguably the wrong choice for Johnny. But the way he does it, I mean, that moment when he smashes the vase and goes, the ice is gonna break, like, that's iconic. And him with his little turned up collar, his slightly weird face, it all just sort of works. And I think with a different director, it would have been a really big error of casting. But with Cronenberg at the helm, it's got that nastiness to it, and it just works for Christopher Walken, I think. And I think everybody else in that movie is great. I mean, Martin Sheen as Stilson is just perfect. I really do like it. And it's one of those ones where I don't think it needs a remake, but if they did a remake and were consciously trying to be different from the original and maybe pull a bit more from the book, then I'd be interested to see it. I don't know if you guys have seen the I can't really call it a mini series because it went on for about 10 years, but the TV series from the early noughts. Like, I happened across the first 3 seasons of that on DVD in a thrift store here, and I've watched season 1. And it's like wow. So the first episode is like, okay, no, this is good. If it's going to go on like this and it's quite faithful to the book, I'm really interested. And then you get 12 episodes of like Johnny the psychic, like helping solve crimes around his local town. And then episode 13, you suddenly get introduced to Greg Stilson and they leave it on a cliffhanger. It's like, cool. I did not need to watch any of that. That was a waste of my time. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Like, particular low point was where the episode where he's out hiking and he falls and gets trapped in a cave and starts hallucinating some Native American who wants to tell him about a plane crashing or something. I was just like, yeah, you know what? I'm out on this.
What's this called?
This is the Dead Zone. This is the TV adaptation of the Dead Zone from the early noughts.
Oh my God.
Yeah. There's one episode
I've never heard of this.
There's one episode where he ends up being being held hostage as a part of a bank heist and uses his psychic powers to help with that. It's all just like, I don't need you to do any of this.
I don't. Yeah, no, I'm fine. Thank you.
I think you were trying, but not
Don't
really.
Don't mess with the classic.
Exactly.
No.
What's your opinion on the Dead Zone, Dylan?
Oh, I absolutely loved it. The one thing I will say about the Dead Zone, it does, for me at least, it is maybe King's most heartbreaking story, because they have the scene in it. He has his ex-girlfriend come over with her son, with her new husband.
Yeah.
And it's just this scene where, his dad comes home and the dad's playing with the little kid, and like they're all just in the house on like a cold day, just trying to get warm and playing with each other.
Yeah.
And it's just the most heartbreaking thing, because his dad's kind of looking at him and it's like, this should have been your life.
Well, exactly. Like for a book where the hook is that some guy has an accident and then he can see people's future, and for him to see that future that he would have had, as you just say, without that accident, like it's just an absolute gut punch. Like, and I think it even gets referenced, like you say, either Herb makes a direct comment to Johnny about it, or it's referenced in the narrative of it. But yeah, like, and it's about so much more than the fact that he finally gets to sleep with Sarah. Like that's almost like an inevitable part of it from the moment she arrives at his house that day. That is going to happen. But you're right, it's the aftermath. It's that family scene. And you've got to bear in mind as well that Johnny's mum's died by that point as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they're obviously feeling the loss of her, and there's probably a presence there of her being there. But yeah, it's just like, this is the future I should have had, and instead I'm getting nut jobs from Inside View magazine trying to get me to be their new psychic, and I'm plotting to assassinate some equal nut job who's going to end up being president of the United States and destroying the world if I don't do it. So yeah, heartbreaking is a perfect word for it.
This is why I love King Month, and this is why I like what you guys were saying at the beginning, of that he has such range. And for someone like me who doesn't know much about King, well, I know a lot about King by now because I'm married to this guy, so like we do and we have a massive King collection, obviously. But in general, we go through our feed and we talk, and we've seen your videos as well and things like that, and just talking about it more and more. I mean, I'm not going to be the ones like, oh my god, I want to read this book now. But I do enjoy the fact that he is such a he writes so many different things. I love when Dylan's like, oh my god, this book is about so and so, and it's like, oh, it's so different than the previous book you just read or whatever, And
that's a big part of it with me for the Dead Zone, because you can look at his bibliography and say, okay, I know I want to see King doing a sort of a thriller adventure story, and you can give people 11/22/63 and they will enjoy that an awful lot because it is a wonderful book. But the Dead Zone has those bits in, and then you can go, okay, I want to be scared. Well, the Dead Zone introduces us to the Castle Rock Killer. It introduces us to Frank Dodd, which is a looming presence in the rest of the Castle Rock books. Mm-hmm. That bit's pretty scary. The potential of this president who's going to blow up the world, that's pretty scary. If you want King doing weird powers that people might associate him with because of Carrie, there's weird powers here. And like we were just saying, if you want heartbreaking, if you want emotional, if you want something that really does tug at your heartstrings, it's all there in this book.
That's incredible. I like that.
And you just gave me the perfect transition, because there's something I ask a lot of King fans, because I'm always curious about their opinion. Mm-hmm. So you said you've read Cujo.
Yes.
King, of course, he loves to leave things open-ended and really kind of let the reader decide. Mm-hmm. And a point in Cujo, I think, I forget the little boy's name, but he's asleep in his bed and he sees eyes mm-hmm. coming from his closet. And King kind of implies that Frank Dodd is the spirit that takes over Cujo.
Yeah.
Do you believe that was Frank Dodd, or do you believe that Cujo was a good dog, he was a good boy, but he just got rabies?
It's a tough question, that, because so often when you look at what King does, when King implies something, quite often it ends up being the case. So there's a lot to be said for, like, okay, perhaps that is Frank Dodd, and it is, and that's what took over Cujo. But I think it's one of the last lines of the book of Cujo that mm-hmm. King takes great pains to say, Cujo was just a good dog, guys. He just good dog that bad things happen to. There's a Dillinger Escape Plan song called "Good Dogs Do Bad Things," and that could be written about Cujo. And I think that Cujo is a good family dog who chased the wrong rodent down the wrong hole at the wrong time, and it all went badly for him. But I think that undeniably the spirit of Frank Dodd haunts that town.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like with Derry again. I think his spirit is so ingrained in everyone who lives in Castle Rock that their mind will see Frank Dodd wherever they see things that cause them to be scared, whether or not that's the case. So yeah, slightly rambling answer, but I think Cujo is a dog that had a bad trip, but that I think Frank is there, but I don't think he's in Cujo.
Okay.
Interesting. Before we wrap up, because we also want to ask you like lightning round questions, things we do right at the end of each episode.
Mm-hmm.
Let's dive in a little bit on what you do, because you can tell our viewers about your YouTube in particular. We know that you started it this summer, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I think just fall. And I know you do book reviews, something similar that what Dylan does. He has Sunday book reviews as well, and he goes book by book. But yeah, just let us know a little bit more, and our viewers know what we can find and where we can find you.
Yeah, so great. So yeah, my YouTube channel it's sort of reviewing King's bibliography, but not just straight up book reviews. What I try to do is each video on his books is titled 19 Reasons to Read, and 19 for obvious, that is the Stephen King number. So it's a bit of a mashup of a review, but also sort of facts and hooks that might get you interested. So I try to create these videos that would be interesting for people who've never read the book before, but also for people who have read the book, they might learn something new from them. And I try to keep them less than 10 minutes at a time. I swear quite a lot in them. The video on Rage was quite a tough one to find 19 reasons why you should read Rage, because it's really not worth your time. But yeah, that's where I'm at. And at the time, as we sit down and record this, my next one is on the Dead Zone, as it happens. So
Nice.
It's going to be hard to rein myself in on that. I'm also planning to do some sort of in between videos as well. So I'm one of those people on Instagram who collects the Rainbow Hodder UK editions of Stephen King books. So I have most of them now, and I have developed some thoughts about that series, some good pointers and some things that really they should have put more thought into. So I'm probably going to do some one-off videos, like something about the Rainbow books. I'm probably going to do something about ties between King and music, because obviously I've got that with my band as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some interesting stuff there. So yeah, I need to get back into the swing of it, but yes, that's where I'm at with that. And the plan is with the book episodes to go through chronologically. And yeah, the other thing that I do King related, aside from being in a band that is named after him, is the Instagram quizzes. So on a Sunday evening UK time, afternoon for US time, we do a King quiz every week, and it's 19 questions. And it's all just done for a bit of fun, and we've got a great community of what I call constant quizzers, who just astound me at their knowledge of Stephen King. Actually, I really like writing quizzes, and it was one of those things that just spawned out of the pandemic and the lockdown stuff. So I don't know if it was the same for you guys, but in the UK, when we first got shut down, the things to do were, one of the big things to do was, right, we're going to do a quiz on Zoom. We're going to do a family quiz, or we're going to do a work quiz, or we're going to do a virtual pub quiz, all of those kind of things. And I ran a few of those I wrote some for my family, and I ran one that raised money for our wonderful NHS here in the UK. And I threw the idea out there on Instagram. I was like, if I did a Stephen King quiz, would you guys be interested? And people turned up. And when I was doing the first one, I was like, should I do this again next week? And they were like, yeah. And that was 6 months ago, and I'm still doing them.
That's awesome, man.
So yeah, they're really
in a couple of them, but I want to get back on it, especially with you, obviously, because you're a big King fan.
And they are. I do try and stick them on my IGTV afterwards because I'm conscious that some people can't make it live, so people can do. People do play along afterwards, which astounds me. Like people hunting out my half-hour ramblings and scrabble together questions to go and play along and DM me their scores. It's really touching. And I'm actually in the process, whether it'll actually happen, but I'm in the process of starting my own Stephen King quiz book. This is something I've been pushed towards by my constant quizzes.
That's wicked. Oh, please tell us more. Like whenever you have the details, just DM us and we'll
I will
make sure that our audience knows as well.
It's basically, it'll be a 19 question quiz for each of his books and potentially the adaptations as well. So I've been starting to write that.
That's so cool.
It'll probably take a long time to pull together, but
still.
Yeah. And then I'm also just started working on a fun, how should I phrase it? Like an audio adaptation of Dead Zone, which I'm not going to talk about too much because I'm in the process of trying to get the necessary permissions to do it, and I'm fully expecting to not be able to get those permissions. So I've written one episode of it, and I think it could be really cool if it pans out. But I'm waiting to hear back. So yeah, it's basically like it's turning the Dead Zone into a true crime podcast.
Ooh,
so
nice.
presenting it as a real thing that actually happened. So yeah, the first episode is written and I really enjoyed doing it. So hopefully his guys will come back to me and be like, yeah, that's cool, go ahead. So we'll see.
That is awesome. We do have a lot of things in common because we're both creative writers as well, and he does horror stuff, of course. I do just different kind of things, more fantasy, for example, because I like mythical creatures. But we do have that in common, so we definitely understand you quite well with like just our creative mindset. My gosh, That's awesome. We'll definitely link everything down below.
Thank you.
So before we go to lightning round, I know you had a specific question for him.
So I've been watching a lot of your videos. Great stuff. You said one thing in one of your videos that I nearly fell over. And once again, totally cool to have different opinions, but I just would really love to hear more about it. You were talking about the long walk.
Yeah.
And you said, I think, kind of quickly after, this is the only good Bachman book. To which I fell out of my chair.
Yeah.
I have not read all the Bachman books. I've not read Rage yet. I've not read another one. Somewhere it's in his collection. But Thinner and The Running Man, I feel like are top tier Bachman books.
I think
King books.
I think without wanting to go against you too much, I think I said it was, if you're only going to read one Bachman book, read The Long Walk. I know I definitely said that. I probably did also say it was. I think it's comfortably the best Bachman book.
Yeah, I can easily see that.
I like Thinner an awful lot, and I've recently reread The Regulators, and I didn't remember anything about The Regulators, and then rereading it, I was like, wow, this is a really cool book. I really like this. It's wholly stupid, but I really like it. The Running Man, The Running Man, first time I read it, I enjoyed it a lot. Second time, I found it a bit of a slog to get through, actually.
Interesting.
And Rage is just a weird little curio of like, okay, it's just fascinating to see where he started and what he was like as an angry young man, but it's really not a very good book. And Roadwork is terrible. Roadwork is really boring.
And that's one I've not read yet. As well as have you read Blaze at all?
Yes, I've read Blaze. That's like his tribute to Of Mice and Men, isn't it? It's a bit of it's very much a sort of Steinbeck style thing. I've only read it the once, and it was one I read fairly early on, so I'm excited to get back to it. And it's definitely up there. I mean, going back to Roadwork briefly, I know you said you haven't read it, and it's not good. Trust me, it really isn't good. But it is worth reading purely for the scene where, well, there's a sex scene that involves a description around something popping out of somewhere else and making a noise like a cork popping out of a champagne bottle, which is so bad it's like so bad it's good. Like it's worth
Don't you
reading
have
the
a
book
YouTube
just to get
video
to
of
that scene.
this? Or someone, didn't I see something? Oh my gosh. Of like, I don't know if it was, I don't think it was you particularly then, but that King has a lot of sex scenes, and I'm like, really?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Lots of bad sex scenes.
A lot of masturbation jokes and
yeah. The long
Okay,
walk,
then.
the long walk, I rank so highly because aside from the fact I think it is a great story.
it's unbelievable.
He wrote that when he was like 17, 18.
Dang. Wow.
And it's fantastic. Thinner is fascinating because that was the first one he wrote when he had the Bachman deal and the Bachman persona in place. That was the first one that was specifically written to be a Bachman book, and it's almost a shame he got rumbled so quickly after that, because the whole Bachman experiment was like it was King doubting himself, doubting his own abilities, and being like, people are just buying my books now because I'm Stephen King. Like, can my work fly with little promotion? Will it still get out there? And they deliberately were sort of paperback only releases, and they really held back on promoting it. And then Thinner, they did a big thing for it, but within months of Thinner coming out, coincidentally, somebody discovered who he was. So we never really got to see the full extent of that experiment. But yeah, I like Thinner an awful lot. I think I was surprised when I reread that at how much fun I had rereading it, because it is a real hoot. And I love the bit where he's like, "You sound like a character in a Stephen King book." And it's like, "Oh, Steve, you big joker, you."
Breaking that fourth wall there.
Yes. For me, Thinner, not just Bachman, it's in my top 5 Kings. Wow. I absolutely adore Thinner. That's, like you said, with the Dead Zone, I read that in like a day and a half, 2 days. Like, I could not put it down. One of my favorite moments is when the gangster that he hires explains to him what he's been doing. I think I may reread it just because it's the Halloween season, and it's a quick read. It's not bad.
Yeah, and the old man's nose is terrifying as well.
I love this book so much.
We can tell. Oh my gosh, we absolutely adore talking to you so much. It's fun to see like other King fans. And like I said, I'm not counting myself, but it's just I like learning about new things, and King is definitely big in our house, as you can awfully tell from the name of our podcast and feed, and like handle King Poe Myers. I wonder why.
Yeah,
wonder why. So lightning round for both of you, really quick.
Okay.
It has to be the first book, because we're talking about King, of course, that comes to your mind. And Dave, because you're our guest, you can answer really quickly first.
Okay.
And it's only 3 questions. So the first one is, what book scared you the most?
Pet Sematary.
Pet Sematary.
I can understand why now. What book surprised you the most?
I'm failing miserably at the lightning round here. What book surprised me the most? Dolores Claiborne.
I still have to read that one. For me, I just read it, Christine. I was not I thought it was a story about a ghost car, and the characters, the world, Christine herself. Christine absolutely blew me away.
And the $1 million question that we're going to ask everybody, of course. Which book would you recommend to someone who has never read a King book before?
Oh, I mean, I've already mentioned, it's really difficult to just pick one. I think if it's somebody who is coming to, I want to read a Stephen King book because Stephen King is the master of horror, then Salem's Lot. Because you get the world building and the monsters and the characters and the lead guy as a writer. You get all of the tropes in one thing. I think if you get somebody saying, that Stephen King guy, he's just all about horror, like, prove me wrong, 11/22/63.
Okay. How about you?
I completely agree with Salem's Lot. That's my all-time favorite King. It has everything you need. It's vampires. It's classic. Another one I would say, because I feel like once you start reading King, you get hooked, I would want to say The Dark Half. because I feel like you need to read the Dark Half to appreciate so many of the Castle Rock stories, because that book is mentioned so many times, and in the I won't go to spoilers, but in the final epic confrontation in Needful Things, the Dark Half is mentioned again.
Yeah. And also in Bag of Bones, you learn more about what happened to Thad as well.
I have not read Bag of Bones. It's right over there. I did read Bag of Bones next. Thank you.
Without a doubt. All right.
But you have to pay attention. It's like literally there's a reference in a line and that's about it. So pay close attention, but it is there.
Will do. Thank you.
I love how he interconnects all the stories. I love that.
It's the best.
So the same 3 questions that we're going to ask just you to every single of our guests is describe Halloween in 3 words.
Halloween. Are we talking like Halloween the season or Halloween the movie?
The season.
The season.
Even
Okay.
the movie would be cool one of these days. With the season. It's different in UK, but I know how much you love Halloween and like the season, the feeling. It's, for us, it's a lifestyle. It's like we have orange lights up all year long. Like that's our thing.
3 words to describe Halloween. Underappreciated in Britain.
I'd like that a lot, actually. We're going to take that answer 100%. Do you have favorite Halloween candy?
Oh, wow.
Something that you guys have that's like special for the season, or?
Not really. Like my wife's doesn't have much of a sweet tooth. We usually get a bunch of supplies in each year, in the assuming that we will get trick-or-treaters come round, and in the cupboard that I can just see to my right, there is still a massive bag of mini bags of Haribo from last year, because we didn't have anyone call round last year. So it's probably Haribo that we would go for. I've been slowly eating them over the course of the year. The idea was going to save them for this year, but now there's a pandemic, so nobody's going to come around anyway. So it's a good thing I'm eating them. Otherwise they go to waste.
Exactly. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it, because we know where to find him, and we'll definitely link you down below.
Sounds wonderful.
I know, right?
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Love talking to a fellow King fan. So much great insight, so much great information. I can't wait to read Bag of Bones right now. Like, that's now high on my list. Anything connected to Castle Rock. Thank you for all of our listeners for tuning in. Keep tuning in, because this is King Month and it's King nonstop.
I feel like we're gonna come back doing a King Month like January. I don't know. Like it's so much fun.
It is fun. So to our viewers, stay tuned for this Sunday for my next
book review. Love.
Thank you. I was doing my KPM book review by yours truly. And please comment, DM, tell us what you think. How did these books impact you? What terrified you? Let us know.
Thank you so much, Dave. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Hey, bye. See you soon.
Bye-bye.